1, 2, 3, go!
This is at War in the Pacific National Park in Guam. When you first look at this, it looks very well maintained, and they do a very good job of maintaining the grass. There's still quite a bit of paint on this howitzer, but when you look close, you see not only rust popping off the paint, but you see where the grass clippings are thrown up on the base of this. Wet, soggy vegetative matter is ideal for promoting corrosion. Further back behind here is another piece of equipment that's now overhung by trees and branches. When it rains, the trees of course get wet, and after it even stops raining, the overhanging branches continue to drip down upon the equipment. Also, it provides shade, which slows down the evaporation of the water that's already on there. So these overhanging branches should be removed, as well as when they mow the grass, to be sure they have a little whisk broom to brush the grass clippings off of the base of these guns.
Hey, who's that guy? He looks familiar.
Now,
Dundee.
here's I think this is a 127mm dual-purpose gun. But here you can see where coconut tree has fallen onto it, and quite a bit of vegetative matter growing around it.
It's the housing. It's just missing on this one.
Here you can see one that's been fairly cleaned off, but it still has quite a bit of stuff that needs to be removed. I think this is the same one we looked at.
Yeah.
Here you can see some iron that has been kept so wet that you even have moss growing on it. These holes were not caused by corrosion. These were shrapnel or from during the war that has blown holes through these. So you've got all kinds of ideal situation. With that moss on there, it also keeps the surface moist, keeps it from drying out, and promotes corrosion. And here you can see very, very advanced states of corrosion. Now, when iron rusts, it expands to several times its original size. And so once this gets going, it then tears other things apart. It expands and forces things apart, and then more moisture can get in, which promotes more deterioration. Also, you can see in a few places here you've got some copper alloy with galvanic corrosion around here. Here you can see where they have been burning, and when Dirk had been out to Mealy, I think before, he talked to them about vegetation removal, and unfortunately they had, since it was fairly dry, they had burnt off the vegetation rather than cutting it and removing it very carefully. And heat is not good for metals, especially uncontrolled. I mean, if you're working in a factory situation and using heat to form or to weld or so forth, that's one situation. But just uncontrolled heat will introduce additional stress into it, which may eventually cause stress corrosion cracking. Also, it's very dangerous because there are unexploded shells everywhere, so it's very important to get across to people that burning the vegetation not only is not good for the artifact, it could be extremely dangerous to people anywhere near the site. Also, it doesn't return anything to the soil. If you cut the vegetation and then compost it, it'll eventually decay, and then you can mix it back with the soil and improve the soil. Oh.
Here you can see the cogwheel shape we talked about. Yeah? That these cogwheel ends fit into the lands of the barrel and turn this whole projectile into a spin in order to direct it to it. The other thing is, this obviously is a fuse, you all know about that. Yeah? This is the most dangerous end of that thing. If you hit this one, you might as well have commit suicide in most cases. Yeah.
So that means it's still alive, huh?
Yes, it still is. There are more in this part of it. There's still on. That's the projector.
What about this one?
That's dead.
That's pretty dead.
That's an air bomb. There's a release hook here, but when you go behind, this is here. It's open. So in this case, it's harmless. And the ideal situation is, what you would like to do is, in the situation before we have all those shells lying, you would like to have that shell there, disarmed, harmless, just a piece of metal like this, but leave it in the gun emplacement because it's part of it. Yeah? The problem is, if you do that and it's live, you have tourists blown up, which is not what we want, right? And you endanger your own selves. But ideally, like this one, this is a harmless piece of metal now, and it's wonderful to use for display or leave it where it is.
Now, is that from one of the railroad small gauge railroad?
No, that's a truck.
Truck. Oh, okay. Here you can see how.
It's quite a bit.
Oh, that's right. Okay. The shifting shoreline, beach retreat. Yeah, these weren't originally on the edge, but the change in the shoreline has exposed these. And also, we haven't talked much about it, but usually in concrete you have reinforcing bars, and one of the biggest problems with concrete deterioration is the concrete, which is usually fairly porous, absorbs moisture, the iron rusts and expands and pops the surface of the concrete off. A similar placement in Pohnpei, but doesn't have the gun in the middle. But it does have the magazine storage things on the side, very similar.
That was for an 8 centimeter gun.
And it'd be real interesting to do drawings of these and compare.
I haven't seen one of those. I saw this one when we were in Pohnpei last week, 2 weeks ago. I've never seen one of those emplacements in the Marshalls.
Huh. Here's another example of beach erosion. That was not originally
Is that the original place?
Yes. But by the way, two things. A, this is the same gun as here at the church. It's another 120mm gun with a single recoil mechanism underneath. Remember we talked about the spider bases?
Yeah.
You can either have a very flat but very wide spider, and sometimes they've had very deep but narrow spider base like this one. Normal ones aren't as deep. This is for these guns. They're there. So if you would have dug up the base where they originally came from, the gun at the church, would have the same type of base. This is about 20 meter shoreline erosion since the war. But this is not all. Sort of in relation, same size relationship, sort of where the door is. No, actually over the window, the other side, would be a pillbox sitting right in the middle of nowhere in the beach. So the whole tip of that beach eroded. And sooner or later that gun might topple over if erosion continues and undermines the base.
In Taro, I think the one of the guns similar to like this is about 2.5 meters high from the bottom of this spiderweb and down to the bottom. You can see it. It's so eroded. The bottom of it is exposed and it's concrete. And then comes the spiderweb all the way up here. And we really have to climb to get up here. But it's just a matter of time before it tilts. So that's also close to coastal erosion.
I believe this is the one you were talking about, and because this is very close to that other one. Isn't this the same site?
That's on the other coast, but it's also Tarawa.
Oh, okay.
It's the pillboxes. No, there's another one, but it's the same thing. You can see the coastal erosion there.
And then typhoon reached that place?
No, that's not. What it is the Japanese connected that island, Tarawa, with the small one south of it, to have the ability to disperse, to distribute their material. And that causeway cut off a current flow, and so the island had to adjust to the new current system. And that started the erosion. One short causeway, about less than 100 meters long, wrecked that out. It's very, very fine changes can do that.
Here you can see how the corrosion has almost totally consumed parts of this. And so the question becomes, should we move this? Especially during high tide or during a storm, salt water washes right over this. And of course then you have some resources that are totally submerged. But in a situation like this, if I'm not mistaken, once it's submerged, it's probably less than right at that level where the water level is, and the tide goes up and down. That's probably where it has the most corrosion, because it gets wet and then it dries out and gets wet and dries out and wet and dries out. So I think probably those parts totally submerged would have less corrosion than those right at the water level. And this is what, the Gorutsumuru?
Gorutsumuru, it's down here, 5 islands down from here. That's the ship where the gun we are preserving comes from.
Now, shortly after the war and continuing today, a lot of artifacts get moved and used for new purposes. Some of which is totally harmless, and some of which can have deteriorating effect. For here, like, you know, things that are wet that you would hang or would drip on it would increase deterioration. This has probably not been moved. It's quite heavy, but there are lots of other things that are moved. Can you guess what this has been used for and what they are?
What are they?
Oxygen? Oxygen tank? It's used for pig pen?
Yes. Yes.
Kitchen table?
The only thing is we don't know what it is.
Wow, copra often, huh?
Okay, that box you see there, yeah, is an ammunition ready box. In order to very quickly get ammunition to the gun emplacements, the Japanese had several rounds of ammunition in those boxes which could be carried. So in this one, this is one which belongs to the dual purpose guns, there were 12 complete rounds in there. A round is the powder bags or the powder cartridge and the shell. That's complete called a round. So 12 complete rounds were in there. For the coastal defense guns, there are 8 in there. And these boxes slide into those recesses, into those little chambers in the emplacements which you will have seen. Yeah? And when they were empty, when they were all shot, you could just drag that box out and slam a new one in.
Is there a rice cooker?
Right. Those get moved around quite a bit, and you see them. Here you can see where someone took a hacksaw or something and sawed off part of that to sell for scrap metal. Likewise, in Honolulu at the Army Museum at Port DeRussy, I would suspect that someone took that as a souvenir. And this is what's left of, what was it, a veil?
That's what's left of a Val dive bomber.
And we have historic photographs of what it was like after it crashed and then shortly thereafter, because the people came and salvaged aluminum off of it to use for other purposes. So these resources not only have corrosion working against them, but previously there were people, scrap metal dealers, and then people coming and taking them and using them for other things. But the thing that is amazing is, despite all of these things, there is a tremendous number of resources left, so that when people walk around these islands, they not only see a beautiful island and great beach and so forth, but there's the added attraction of all these different types of resources. What's interesting here is, and maybe I should ask you, what do you see here?
Metal windows with rivets, movable.
Some of them are still movable.
And the washing down of the, what's the name of that term?
Okay. We have this projection here, which was, I believe, a bomb shield.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? So that if a bomb hit and came down, it would bounce off and bounce away from the building, which provides a little bit of projection and a little bit of shelter. So you have some of the original paint here. And this part, since it's out further, has been exposed more, and the paint has deteriorated and it's corroded, and then it washes down over there, and you have corrosion, erosion also.
Elvis, that building is identical to Xavier.
Yeah.
That is north of Tarawa on a small island. Identical thing.
Okay, what do you see here? Besides dirt.
Are these paint still on the
Paint?
barrel muzzle?
No, there's no paint left on that.
Those are rust, huh?
Yeah. And that's pretty uniform corrosion.
Maybe no overhang vegetation.
You've got vegetation over there.
Looks like that.
But
No, there's no paint on it.
Okay, it looks like.
Yeah.
That's the one in the
Yeah.
when we went.
What do you see here?
that's where the liquid always water drips,
Yeah.
remains for a long time after rain.
Also,
About those rings,
Yeah, I was going to point them out. Remember we talked about those rings in the gun? These are the A tube, B tube, C tube. These are the tubes of the gun which are shrunk on and not just stop somewhere on the barrel but go all the way to the muzzle. Right? This is the inner tube, then they put some wire winding around the back, but shrunk the next tube on this one, some more wire wound around the breech chamber, the next tube. Right? This here is what?
Corroded also.
Yeah, but this is also corrosion, this uniform. What is this type of corrosion?
previous.
Erosion corrosion.
Wotje?
Erosion corrosion. It just drips, runs down here, drips off, and takes more and more metal with it as it goes along, right? And also it runs back. So all this down here is very bad. Up here it's just very uniform. By the way, one other thing, if you want to look for gun numbers and you have a well-preserved gun, they can also be up here. But because they're punched into the iron, the corrosion of the iron surface just takes it off very quickly. And so we lose the number altogether.
Doug, if we cut that barrel, can you still see the wires nowadays?
Yes, if you would slice the barrel this way,
Right.
yeah, yes, down there you would see the wires, sure. I mean, they are not loose, they're welded together, but you could, in this cross section, you would clearly identify them. Oh yes.
You want to talk about the turrets on
Okay.
the side here?
Okay, so this is what we haven't seen. This is a 127mm dual purpose gun, right? As we have seen them before. But here the difference is here the turret is left. It's actually not a turret. It's a housing. A turret or shield assumes a defensive thing, right? That the people can stay behind and are not hurt by people firing. This is thin galvanized iron, most likely galvanized. And this is basically the driver's seat. He's got 4 controls for elevation, for turning over, and for rate of fire. This is here, this housing, the driver. This, you must imagine here are glass or plexiglass covered windows. Yeah? And there's another part of the housing over there. This guy took the aim and fire in here, controlling this gun. This gun could spin 360 degrees around.
Now, if it was electrical, why would you have to turn it with the handles?
Swedish. Have you ever sat in Europe in a tram? Streetcar?
Yeah.
They also have got turn wheels, although it was electrical. Nowadays it's buttons.
Yeah.
The old days you always have to turn the, but it's, the handle is then electrically translated, right? Now one thing, if you look at this, apart from the corrosion, look at this.
What's that? Projectile?
It's
Are
a
you
wooden,
saying that was electrically?
Yes. yes.
How could you tell that?
Okay, no, these guns are electrically driven. And remember I told you there is this big hole, you have to be careful that you don't fall in?
Yeah.
That is the access hole to get underneath at the electromotor. Now, that means something else too. If you have a battery like this, yeah, and you find 1 or 2 of those guns, somewhere nearby is the generator station. It must be there. It's a standard setup. You've got to find it. These are electrically driven guns. They're built in. They came into the market into the service in 1936. The Type 96 guns. Yeah.
Are you positive about the electric motor?
Yes.
You can see underneath the gun.
500%.
There's the motor.
That's an electric motor, my
Down here is the
friend.
motor. There are several motors driving that whole thing up and round. The big motors underneath driving it round. This is a real problem because once the Americans knocked out the power stations, these guys were history. Whereas the other coastal defense guns, they are sometimes also electrically driven, but they always had the manual crankshaft to get those things going manually. These
Don't.
What are
as
the
far as I
4
remember.
tubes on top?
Over there? The
These
four
tubes?
recoil.
They're recoil. 2
What
for
about-
each barrel.
Okay, what about that one you pointed out? What's that?
Someone plugged it,
Oh.
and it looks, because it's so nicely done, that plug, it could be an original one. You didn't want to get any moisture or too much dirt in there, so it looks like an original plug. It's a very nicely done one.
It could also have been a plug set in by the Americans after the war as a part of the surrender terms. Because the surrender terms required that all guns that were still usable should be
Plug.
yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is that's a wooden thing you can pull out. I think they were plugging and breaking the breech ends. If I'm
Or
not
removing
mis-
the breech ends.
Or removing the breeches, yes. This is a very nicely machined plug, so it's not sort of a makeshift thing. When I was in the Navy, our gun tips had a brass cap over them. to protect from oncoming seawater from getting in.
But the 1946 pictures from Malola shows that these mussels have been covered up with cloth very nicely in order to protect rain to get in. I don't know why they should do that if they surrender. That was 1946.
You never know what the Americans wanted to do with those guns in the end.
Okay, now Dirk was talking about those magazine boxes. We did find one that still had the wood in them, and how this wood escaped decay all these years. It'd be interesting to find out what kind of wood they used for that, because it almost looks like new.
Yeah.
This is, you see,
And let me see if here's one. You can see just like with a wine rack, so you can put bottles in there. This is all set up so that you can put the ammunition in there, and then that was at the other end for the tips.
so you can scrape metal against metal, it's fine. The only things you don't want to get scraped are the fuses. Now, this is, now let's see whether you remember what I said before. How many holes are there?
12.
Okay, so which type of gun is it?
127mm.
Right. If it would be an eight holes, it would be coastal defense gun. Yeah. Now, anti-aircraft guns, the 127mm are dual-purpose guns, either against ships as coastal defense or against aircraft. Now, if you fire them against aircraft, then you're not just trying to shoot the aircraft down. That's very hard to do. The normal flak, the normal shell would fly to a certain height, and once it reaches the height, would explode. And then all the metal fragments would fly everywhere, and if a plane is even close by, it would get hit by the disintegrating shell. To do that, the fuses had a timer on them. And you know it takes so many seconds to get up there, from calculations. They had the tables, so they had the fuses for this. So the last thing you want is those time-sensitive fuses to be scratched or damaged. That's why they sit in wood.
Okay. Now is this a part of the railroad?
Yeah, the engine, part of the engine.
Now, did these have an upper part that was made of wood, or was there light?
No, they have some sort of the engine. This is the bottom part of a railroad engine, yeah, with narrow gauge railroads. On top of it, you have to imagine the engine block and a little housing, but that was fairly thin. Where the engine block went, who knows?
Which type of plane is this?
Is that a zero?
That's most likely a tail of a zero, yes.
Now, with aluminum, the aluminum has fared fairly well in this climate. Where we found the most deterioration was not on the outside surface. They would have selected an aluminum alloy that would have been weather resistant to corrosion. Where we found the most corrosion on the aluminum was in the engines, where they would have selected an alloy that would be resistant to heat from the motor, or within the wings that were broken open, because there they would have selected an alloy that would be strong to hold the plane together. So the outside of them are usually in much better condition than the interiors, which were never intended to be exposed to the elements. And there still is a fair amount of primer left on some of these. Most of the surface coat of paint is pretty well deteriorated away. And this is the one right up here that we walk by each day.
I think if you get into this a bit more, the things you want to look out for is what's the number of propeller blades, how big is the engine, and so on, to start identifying which planes these things come from.
Is that from the zero?
No, Zeros have got 3-blade propellers.
3 blades?
Betis have got 3-blade propellers. but
Seaplane.
seaplanes have got 4-blade propellers. Yeah, both the Mavis and the Emily, which fits because we're here on the seaplane base. Yeah? But so things like this you want to watch out for.
Okay, this is a bronze part of breech block, and you can see the galvanic corrosion around it.
Let me just show you something else. Something we don't see here is this bit. It actually comes round and ends in a pin. This is the handle that you jerk open to move this whole thing. Here the handles have corroded on the guns we have seen. There are some guns in Mili and in Taro which still have the handle on it.
And what about the
But
screw?
this one's fairly good in that it's fairly intact compared to that one we saw a little earlier that was sawn off. This is our typical situation with vegetation growing over everything, and not only is it not good for the weapon, it's also dangerous for the tourists and the guides who take the tourists, because who knows what's lying underneath that. Once you clean the vegetation away, then it can be maintained. Even with one of these little portable weed whackers, you can go around and just keep trimming everything back so that they're more visible for tourists to see and appreciate, and also to keep this stuff off of the surface of the metal.
These particular guns always have concrete emplacements all together. So there's actually concrete base under there. Once you get rid of all the debris inside, all you have to do is sweep it out once in a while. Whereas the coastal defense guns, the one we are looking at, they don't have a concrete platform to stand on. They only have got concrete sides, if we are lucky, or some little revetment boxes for the ammunition recesses. Right?
Okay, here you can see.
Oh, the handle.
Yeah, amongst other things.
What?
He said the handle, amongst other things.
Yeah. But you can see all this vegetation on there. And then once you remove it, you can see how much more corrosion you have under the vegetation. So by keeping it off of it, even if it's not even painted, you can prevent some of the corrosion.
What's the term for that corrosion?
I know.
For this one?
The common name is like wet leaves in your gutter.
Leaves.
Erosion, corrosion.
No. It traps oxygen concentration cell, or crevice corrosion. Because it's oxygen trapped between the wet leaves and the surface.
Now, one of the things to keep in mind is since the leaves also rot, all sorts of other chemicals are set free during the rotting process, which aren't helpful.
Bad news for these guns. Large trees.
Where is that picture from?
Mili. Remember I said that Mili doesn't have any turrets or shields? See, that's what they look like there.
These trees shade that, and there you see moss growing. It stays wet longer and can support moss. Okay, now this is right here. These are torpedo racks, and you walk past these. Did you stop and show them the...
Not the corrosion, just the racks.
Okay, here you see the typical way these are attached. However, on some of them, these were welded on here. And so what do you have there?
Erosion, corrosion.
No.
What does welding do?
Heat.
Melt.
It puts heat, and the heat causes
Stress.
stress, So you have stress corrosion cracking.
Stress corrosion.
Also, it doesn't have to take heat. It can take just plain force. And you see these. There's one of two things happening. That these were defective to begin with, or because they were tightened in the stress, and you can see these cracks coming down. So more than likely, it's stress.
That, by the way, is also at the torpedo blade here.
Adios.
What type of corrosion is that?
Why is
Look
it
carefully.
Galvanic.
Why?
Different parts
Correct. Correct.
cracking.
This piece in here is different, and it's causing those two parts to deteriorate very, very rapidly. And this is one of the best examples I have seen anywhere.
Still intact, huh?
Which of the two is the anode?
The bronze. The glass.
Yeah.
The anode is the middle one. This one? Or this one?
This and this is the anode.
Yeah.
This is the cathode.
Cathode.
And because this is deteriorating, it's protecting this. So if this were removed and just exposed, it would have deteriorated much faster. But this is protecting it.
I mean, you see, when bronze deteriorates, it creates a green deterioration project, green corrosion project, which we call at archaeology quite often called patina.
Patina.
Patina. This corrosion is very little. Look, I mean, most of it already still has got the original color of the bronze, this pinkish color, yeah, and very little green. If it would normally be exposed, it would be totally green, like the bronze we've seen at the cannon, at the gun we are preserving right now at the church, as a color comparison. All right. And when that gun was serviceable, every bronze piece would have been pinkish, like there.
Now the iron rusts, and to review, the rust is very porous, whereas the corrosion on bronze is a very tight, non-porous, and actually protects the bronze. So corrosion isn't always bad. Go ahead.
Two things. One, galvanic corrosion again,
Right.
very heavily. This huge piece of copper alloy, small amount of iron. So like this example with the iron rivets in the copper plates, this goes very fast. But the other point I want to point out is this lot. Okay, there are lots of stamps around. One of the things you must keep an eye out for are the little anchors. Anchors are all Navy size, but the anchors of the Japanese Navy designate where the gun or the shell has been made. If you have an anchor and there is a wavy line across here, a double wavy line, it comes from Kura Naval Yard. Is there an S? It comes from Sasebo. Is there a Y? It comes from Yokosuka. I will provide you in that little background material which I will send you for the workbook. You will have in there a list of those anchors. This one is a British anchor. Notice the little crown up here. Yeah, that's a British anchor. So this is a British manufacturing mark. The interesting thing is that it's actually a British Navy anchor on it. So at one point that may have been accessed by the Navy and then sent out. We don't know.
So what does BD stand for?
And not the foggiest idea. I haven't got the foggiest idea. It's some of those things which needs to be researched. And I would like to be able to spend sort of 4 weeks in the Imperial War Museum in London. Maybe we'd get something.
Okay, what do you see here? This is at the Military Museum at Fort DeRussy in Honolulu.
Preface corrosion. Also stress corrosion.
About pitting also. There may be a number of things going on here, but one of the reasons I put this in is that even after we clean and paint these, we need to constantly come back and monitor, and wherever corrosion begins to show up, we need to take care of it. Now, one of the things I really worry about is, I mean, the ideal situation is that you take these into a laboratory and you clean them and you take them apart and you get corrosion out of all of the joints between pieces. That's something we're not going to be able to do when cleaning on site. And so when you have corrosion in joints and cracks and so forth, it's really going to be hard to maintain a good coating on these. So this is something that I suspect we'll see in the next few years, even after we clean and prime and paint the guns here. What do you think is happening here?
Stress corrosion. Breathing.
Possibly. There's a good chance that when those were placed on there, you probably have a crevice corrosion or oxygen trapped between those, and of course once corrosion gets going, it's very difficult to stop this unless you take those off, clean them thoroughly, prime and paint, and then put it all back together.
It does seem to have some galvanic corrosion going on because all the screws were intact.
Maybe brass screws. Here you can pretty well see the same thing going on. I was amazed when I first looked at this. I mean, things look fairly good from a distance, and until you get up and start looking at it closely, and then you see all kinds of problems.
Is this a gun or something?
This was on a truck or a tank or something. I'd have to go back and try to figure out. Here you can see some hose where there obviously was something attached there, and so it's probably rusting through from the back side. It was probably painted underneath and behind. Does anybody know what this is?
That's part of the airplane, or
No, no.
just like
That's
two roofs, two gutters. The gutters.
Yeah, it's roofs.
Two roofs joined lead.
Yeah, it's lead. I was looking for examples of other examples of erosion corrosion, and this is where two domes come down on a lead roof on a mosque in Turkey. And up above you have stonework that's deteriorating and pieces are falling down, and as this deteriorates, little bits break off and wash down through the gutter, and as those sharp pieces of stone roll down with the water, it erodes away the lead work there. this is the track on a tank, and when these were used every day, just using them kept the rust off of them, because as it went over gravel and everything, it abraded the rust off, so they kept very clean. And so you didn't have to worry about these little areas that now hold water. Tanks weren't designed to set parked in one place, and so then you have a situation. I'm not quite sure how you would solve something like this. How do you keep water out of there? You really wouldn't. Well, I guess as a last resort, you possibly in some of these places that collect water drill down through so there'd be a weep hole so it would drain. Although you'd hate to destroy part of it by putting that in there, but in the long run it might solve the problem.
You might be able to stick it under a roof like this here, which is open from all sides, so visitors can go through, but you protect it from the rain from the top.
I just threw this in to show that this was done from shrapnel from an explosion, and still quite visible. Here's some tanks.
One thing you may want to have a look at is at the left tank. So this was hit. It must have burned with a very large intensity and it shrunk. I mean, it's collapsed, and you can see how it is sort of curved inward, the metal. A similar type of fire we can observe at the big fuel tanks here at the beach on the way to the power station.
What was that island?
That's Tarawa, Maloland. These tanks are all welded and riveted together.
There it is.
Hey, you want to talk about this?
That actually is a dual purpose gun in this case, which blew up. I mean, it looks as if what we're seeing there is that the different tubes are had stress or surface corrosion happening, and then the whole thing just cracked down and blooms. We see this in one of the guns here very clearly when we go down, the same thing. It's one of our earliest guns we have. It's the same number system as we've seen, but they're from 1898. They come from 2 battleships. We can boil it down to 2 battleships, the Katori or the Kashima, it's either or.
Is that a British made?
Yes, it's a British made. You can see the EOC on top, that it says 6-inch breech loading, the number is 11377. Yeah. Okay, not every time you're so lucky. In order to keep those recoils well greased and oiled, you had to refill it. And the British in the beginning just gave all the instructions on this big copper plate. Now this here is, it's nice for us. It gives us a clear idea of which type of gun mount it is. What it says is 6-inch QF for quick firing mount, Mark II. Now the British term for model or type is Mark. Yeah, so this means Model 2, and it's obviously a copper alloy. Yeah, has been hacked, and the little holes you see in the middle, where the main labeling is, are caused by shrapnel from a bomb explosion. But what is this?
Bolts.
Yeah, but what is it? What type of corrosion is it? Galvanic corrosion. You see, they use iron screws or bolts to hold that plate on. That goes.
What's happening here?
Rust.
What?
Rust.
Yeah.
Pieces. It's breaking off.
basically what you have there is an inaccessible place to maintain, and that's going to be a real problem. When these things were originally put together and primed and painted and put together, and as long as they never rusted, you could keep them fairly clean and maintain them. But once you have rust like this, it's very hard to clean that out and to clean out the joints and prime and paint it and maintain it. So I'm afraid we're going to have this type of problem also with some of the guns, especially those that have those shields or turrets around them, because we're going to have some places that are really going to be hard to get in, even to sandblast. And then once you get them cleaned out, to get in there and paint, because some of those places it's hard to even get your hand in spaces. This is one of the few where there still is some remnants of the original paint and primer. Now, remember Dirk was talking about the administration building that was very strongly built, and as a civilian building you could rationalize and say it was built very, very strongly because of typhoons. Here, this end of the building, there are 2 columns missing from the bomb, where columns were blown out from when the bombs hit it, and it's still standing and it's sagging.
Look at this.
Really? Wow.
Oh,
Bomb went all the way through, right?
yeah.
That is right. But you can see them missing. I mean, this one in the corner is missing.
Yep. Yeah.
This one's missing, and behind are 2 missing. This is gone. This is gone. So it hangs basically on those 2, and of course in all the. It's now being used as a church. So in Tarawa Malola. Oh. One other thing I may want to add is the Navy later chipped part of the concrete off and added on some material to strengthen the building. They tried to weave some of the reinforcement bars into it. This here is an extra beam reinforcement which they concreted in. It's shoddy concrete. It has been made with a lot of coral, local sand, apparently not properly washed, and so the concrete isn't very strong because the salt crystallizes out. The concrete which is most damaged in that building is the Army the Army concrete, the Navy stuff put in later, not the civilian concrete built to proper specifications. But it's something you guys need to look out for when you see those structures. There may be some additional work done which gives you some good ideas what happens. This stuff here is...
How can you tell that there was an additional...
Because it has got a clear break on top, it has nothing to do with the original structure, and in a few cases other things you can see they chipped off the original plasterwork in order to get the reinforcement bars to open in. This is just stuck on. It's sort of like nailing another beam on.
This is the upper part that's used as a church, and they put plywood over the bomb holes.
It's also a place where they sit. Chairs.
Okay, let's back up and think about this building a little bit. What should be done with this? What sort of treatment? Would you want to restore this building?
No, make it safe first.
Good. But all this damage actually is evidence of its history. And if you, restored the building and put the columns back and everything, you'd be destroying part of the history of this island. So one of the things we're toying with is eventually coming and sandblasting the exposed reinforcing bars, and in a few cases removing some of them, where it would be a hazard for a child or a person or a tourist going through and not see them and have an eye poked out or something like that. It'd probably be a good idea to remove some of them. But in most cases, just leave it the way it is and just clean those bars off, prime them and paint them probably a brownish rust color so that you wouldn't change the character of the building, and just leave it that way. And then hopefully it won't cause further deterioration, because rust will tend to just keep going until it's totally consumed. Now this is the one that's right down here, and what's absolutely amazing is that after taking a really severe direct hit, that this has survived all this time with the walls bulged out and leaning, and
I think next time we go down to the guns and have the discussion of the different types of corrosion in the recording, we should go inside and have a look. One of the columns, where they've got that picture, yeah, here we go, snapped, yeah, offset and bent down, is still holding up. You can imagine what amount of stress is on those rebars. This is Atoll again.
The strange thing is that those reinforcing bars, there isn't even any concrete in there to take the compression, so those rebars are taking what compression is coming down through there.
There's also another thing, if you look at it, the concrete on the bottom is a bit different from the concrete on top. Now, someone has done, during the war, the Americans, when they conquered Kwajalein, they had a few pillboxes there, and so they tested all that type of equipment on those Kwajalein pillboxes. Right? Set distance, and they fired against them to see what type of things would happen to them for their own experiences. And one of the things they found is that Japanese concrete wasn't very good. One of them, the main thing, was the failure to do a continuous pour. So if you looked in modern construction, you will see that they keep the construction, the trucks coming to have a continuous pour of the building or of the floor. You don't pour half of it, stop, go home, come back next week and pour again, yeah, for a column. But this seems to be just that, well, this seems to have happened right there, because the mixture on top and bottom is so different that it didn't mix properly. That's one possibility why it cracked like that.
That's what's known as a cold joint.
Oh, okay. That is your big trap. If you aren't careful, you fall in those. This is the hole at the base of a 120mm gun emplacement. Down there's water. If the emplacement hasn't been shattered, then in that tunnel is water, and it's a deep tunnel because you can crawl and almost sort of walk bent underneath to get at the electromotor.
So if this is full of leaves, palm fronds and stuff like that, and especially if a child comes along and steps on there and doesn't know that hole is there, they can fall down in there, drown, or break an arm or a leg or whatever. And so you need to watch for these and keep these cleared out, and possibly those holes covered over with maybe a wood.
Well, if you use them for display, yeah, you may want to do is get yourself an inch-thick sheet of plexiglass or something like that and put it over so that it's obvious there's a hole, you can see it, but you can stand on it if necessary.
Okay, what's going on here? What?
It's working in flakes.
Henry, what is it?
It's a
What type of corrosion? There are two types happening. What is it? At least.
Ocean?
Corrosion on the bottom and the sides all down. But there's most likely some other type of corrosion happening as well.
Stress.
Where? Yeah. At the muscle. It looks very blooming if you look. It looks as if it unfolds like a flower. You see that? That it starts springing out?
Now, the gun that we're working on at the church is sort of frozen in a horizontal position. This one is frozen at a position up in the air, exposing that so that water can work more on that upper edge, which makes it worse.
And probably get filled up.
May very well be filled up with moisture.
There's one thing. Oh yeah, okay. This is great. But it doesn't matter. One of these things I've seen in Pohnpei and also in Chuk is they're the guns. They are cave guns. Yeah. So part of the muscle sticks out of the cave, but the part of the barrel, but most of it is inside. And you can have, if they're level those guns, you have a heavily corroded muscle, whereas the breech end still has got the original paint all over it. Yeah? That's protected. And then you have got three types of erosion there. Almost no corrosion or very little uniform corrosion at the breech, heavy corrosion or uniform corrosion at the front. But the middle section, that's where the cave overhang is, has got very heavy pitted corrosion because of the drips. Yeah? And the horror is, you see, it drips on it, the drip wore the paint off, and now you have got this pit corrosion going on, but because the next raindrop hits into the same pit, you also have got erosion corrosion, whatever had been loosened is flushed out. So they're really deep pits. Yeah? It's very amazing. You've got one gun and three very distinctly different ones. I photographed it there. It's very interesting, and what one needs to do there is, in theory, ideally, is stop the drip from the cave by putting a roofing over it. But if you do that, you destroy the entire integrity and appearance of the gun cave. So you'll have and if you start now filling this, you know this term steady drop hollows out a stone. If you put filler in it, the filler is going to be softer than the metal. So you're going to be refilling those holes all the time.
Okay, what's happening here?
Is that a hole from a shovel?
Hole from what?
A bomb? No?
Might be. It's a little hard to tell this late date.
Look at this. What is that?
Stress.
This is a prime example to show you what, this is the top tube shrunk over the other one, and it cracks here. This is really wonderful to see. We have got another smaller, not as good example in here, on this side. Here's the same thing. This is the, yeah.
There you can see a close-up. Once corrosion starts on one of those inner tubes, that when it expands, then it cracks and forces off even larger pieces. So you know, a number of things happening there. What's happening here?
Okay, don't laugh, John. What's happening?
You want a bit?